Imagine for a moment that every challenge in your life, whether it's a financial struggle, a relationship conflict, or a personal failure, no longer leaves you feeling trapped, anxious, or overwhelmed. Instead, you face each obstacle with a sense of calm, a deep understanding that no matter how hard life gets, you are in control of your own peace. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? Yet there's a path that has been used for centuries to cultivate this very sense of inner peace. It's the practice of mindfulness, learning to live in the present moment and to see life's adversities not as threats, but as opportunities for growth. As you embark on this journey, you'll discover that peace isn't found in avoiding problems or running away from discomfort. Instead, peace is something you build from within, regardless of what's happening around you. This video invites you to explore how mindfulness, coupled with a consistent meditation practice, can help you navigate the most difficult moments in life with grace and calm. We will break down how this practice works, share specific examples of people who have applied these techniques, and provide you with actionable steps to begin your own transformation. The power of the present moment. One of the core principles of mindfulness is the understanding that peace is found in the present moment, not in the past or future. Our minds are naturally inclined to dwell on past mistakes or anticipate future challenges, which often leads to anxiety, stress, and regret. But when we anchor ourselves in the present, we begin to realize that this moment, right here and now, is all that truly matters. Consider the case of Sarah, a woman in her mid-40s who, like many of us, spent most of her life worrying about things she couldn't control. She constantly replayed old arguments in her head, wondering if she could have said something different. She worried about her children's future, her job security, and even the opinions of people around her. Despite having a stable job and a loving family, Sarah found herself increasingly anxious and unable to enjoy the good things in her life. Then, she began practicing mindfulness. Initially, it was difficult. Her mind would race back to the past or jump ahead to the future. But slowly, with practice, she learned how to bring her attention back to the present moment. She used her breath as an anchor, noticing the way it felt as it moved in and out of her body. Whenever her thoughts wandered, she gently brought them back to her breath. Over time, Sarah realized that the things she had been worrying about, her past mistakes, the unpredictable future, did not hold as much power over her anymore. She became more present with her children, more engaged in her work, and more at peace with herself. This shift didn't happen overnight, but through consistent practice, Sarah discovered a profound truth. The present moment is all we ever truly have. By living fully in the present, we free ourselves from the suffering that comes from dwelling on what we cannot change. Meditation, a path to inner stillness. If you've ever tried meditating, you know how challenging it can be to quiet the mind. Thoughts seem to come from nowhere, pulling you in different directions. You might sit down to meditate, intending to focus on your breath, but within minutes, your mind is racing with thoughts about your to-do list, that awkward conversation from last week, or an upcoming deadline. This is where the practice of meditation becomes invaluable. Meditation isn't about stopping your thoughts or forcing your mind to be quiet. It's about observing your thoughts without getting caught up in them. It's about cultivating the ability to return to the present moment again and again, no matter how many times your mind wanders. Take, for example, John, a man who worked in a high-stress corporate job. He was always on the go, constantly juggling meetings, deadlines, and personal commitments. Over time, the stress took a toll on his health. He developed insomnia, high blood pressure, and chronic anxiety. One day, on the advice of a friend, John decided to try meditation. At first, it felt impossible. His mind was like a runaway train, constantly thinking about the next task or worrying about things beyond his control. But John persisted. Each time his mind wandered, he brought his attention back to his breath or the sensations in his body. Slowly, he began to notice small changes. He became more aware of his stress triggers and was able to respond to them more calmly. His sleep improved, his blood pressure dropped, and most importantly, he started to feel a sense of peace that he hadn't felt in years. Meditation didn't change the external pressures of John's job, but it changed how he responded to them. It gave him the inner strength to stay calm in the face of stress, and it taught him that peace isn't something we find outside of ourselves. It's something we cultivate within, facing adversity with calm. Let's dive deeper into how mindfulness can help us deal with life's inevitable challenges. Life is full of ups and downs. Sometimes we face difficult situations that seem insurmountable. Whether it's a financial crisis, a health scare, or the breakdown of a relationship, adversity can leave us feeling helpless and overwhelmed. But with mindfulness, we can learn to face these challenges with grace. One powerful example of this comes from Anna, a woman who went through a devastating divorce. After 15 years of marriage, her husband abruptly left her for someone else. Anna was left heartbroken, confused, and angry. She felt betrayed, and for months, she couldn't move past the pain. She replayed every argument in her head, wondering if there was something she could have done differently. She was stuck in a cycle of blame and regret. Then, Anna decided to try something different. She began to practice mindfulness, starting with short meditation sessions each morning. At first, it was difficult. Her thoughts were consumed with anger and sadness. But as she continued her practice, she started to notice subtle shifts. She began to observe her emotions without getting caught up in them. Instead of fueling her anger by replaying the betrayal over and over again, she allowed herself to feel the sadness without judgment. Through mindfulness, Anna learned that it was okay to feel pain, but she didn't have to be consumed by it. Slowly, she started to rebuild her life. She focused on the things she could control, like her own healing, and let go of the things she couldn't, like her ex-husband's actions. The process wasn't easy, but by cultivating mindfulness, Anna found a path to peace in the midst of her suffering. This story illustrates an essential truth. Adversity is an inevitable part of life, but how we respond to it determines whether we suffer or grow. When we practice mindfulness, we develop the resilience to face challenges without being overwhelmed by them. We learn to observe our emotions without being controlled by them, and we discover that peace is always available to us, even in the most difficult times. Finding happiness within. One of the most common misconceptions about happiness is that it comes from external circumstances, money, success, relationships, or possessions. We believe that once we achieve a certain goal or acquire a certain thing, we'll finally be happy. But the reality is that external circumstances are always changing, and basing our happiness on them leaves us vulnerable to disappointment. Mindfulness teaches us that true happiness comes from within. It's not about what we have or what we achieve. It's about how we relate to the present moment. When we cultivate mindfulness, we learn to appreciate the simple things in life: a breath of fresh air, the warmth of the sun, the sound of a bird singing. We become less attached to the idea that we need something external to make us happy and more attuned to the joy that is already present in our lives. Consider the story of David, a man who spent years chasing success in his career. He worked long hours, climbed the corporate ladder, and made a lot of money. But despite all his achievements, David never felt satisfied. He was always looking for the next promotion, the next big project, the next thing that would finally make him happy. Then one day, David had a health scare that forced him to reevaluate his life. He realized that he had been so focused on achieving external success that he had neglected his own well-being. In the weeks following his diagnosis, David began to practice mindfulness. He started to notice the small moments of joy in his day: his morning coffee, a walk in the park, a conversation with a friend. These moments, which he had previously overlooked, became sources of happiness. Through mindfulness, David learned that happiness isn't something we achieve, it's something we experience in the present moment. He became more present with his family, more engaged in his hobbies, and more at peace with his life. The external pressures of his career were still there, but they no longer dictated his happiness. This shift in perspective is one of the most profound gifts of mindfulness. It teaches us that we don't need to chase happiness. We can find it right here, in the present moment. When we stop looking outside of ourselves for fulfillment and start appreciating the simple joys of life, we unlock a deep sense of contentment that can't be shaken by external circumstances. Embracing compassion and forgiveness. A key aspect of mindfulness is the cultivation of compassion, both for ourselves and for others. Compassion is the practice of understanding and accepting our own suffering and the suffering of those around us. It's about letting go of judgment and embracing forgiveness, even when it's difficult. Forgiveness is often misunderstood as a sign of weakness or a way of excusing bad behavior. But in reality, forgiveness is a powerful act of self-liberation. It's not about condoning what someone has done. It's about freeing ourselves from the burden of resentment and anger. Let's look at the story of Mark, a man who was deeply hurt by a close friend. His friend had betrayed his trust, and for months, Mark carried the weight of that betrayal. He was angry, bitter, and unable to move on. But as he began to practice mindfulness, Mark realized that holding on to his anger was only hurting him. His friend had moved on, but Mark was still stuck in a cycle of resentment. Through mindfulness, Mark learned the power of forgiveness. He didn't excuse his friend's actions, but he let go of the anger that was keeping him trapped. He recognized that forgiveness wasn't about the other person. It was about his own healing. By letting go of his resentment, Mark freed himself from the pain of the past and opened the door to peace. Compassion and forgiveness are not easy practices, especially when we've been deeply hurt. But when we cultivate these qualities through mindfulness, we begin to see that holding on to anger only perpetuates our own suffering. By letting go of resentment, we free ourselves to live with more peace, more love, and more joy. In the end, the journey toward inner peace is a deeply personal one. It's not about avoiding life's challenges or pretending that everything is perfect. It's about learning to face adversity with grace, to find joy in the present moment, and to cultivate compassion for ourselves and others. Mindfulness and meditation offer powerful tools for navigating this journey. They teach us that peace is not something we find outside of ourselves. It's something we cultivate from within. By living fully in the present moment, by embracing both the joys and the challenges of life, we unlock a deep well of inner strength. If you're just starting on this path, remember that it's a process. Peace doesn't come overnight, and it's okay to struggle along the way. The key is to be patient with yourself, to practice consistently, and to trust that each step you take brings you closer to the peace you seek. This video is an invitation to explore this journey for yourself. Start small. Begin with daily mindfulness practices like focusing on your breath or paying attention to the sensations in your body. Over time, you'll find that these practices bring more calm, more clarity, and more joy into your life. And remember, the present moment is always available to you. No matter what challenges you face, no matter how difficult life gets, peace is just a breath away.